I pulled into the driveway 11 days early because the pipeline inspection got canceled. That's all it was. A scheduling change. The crew supervisor called at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday and said the third-party auditors had pushed the timeline back 3 weeks, so half of us were getting rotated out. I'd been on that platform in the Gulf of Mexico for 4.5 months. I didn't call ahead. I wanted to surprise my son. Marcus was 8 years old. He had his mother's dark eyes and my habit of chewing on pen caps when he was thinking hard about something. His mother, my wife Diane, had passed 2.5 years earlier. Ovarian cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. After that, it was just the two of us in a 3-bedroom house in Beaumont, Texas, with a dog named Pepper and a backyard that needed mowing more than I ever got around to it. I'd met Gwen at a grief support group 8 months after Diane died. She had a son of her own, a little older than Marcus, and she understood what it was like to wake up in an empty bed and still reach for someone who wasn't there anymore. We got married that spring. It seemed right at the time. She was good with Marcus, or I thought she was. He was quieter around her than he'd been before, but I told myself that was just grief, just adjustment, just the way things were now. The offshore rotation kept us stable financially. 4 months on, 6 weeks off. The money was good enough that Gwen didn't have to work, and Marcus was set for college before he turned 10. I told myself that's what a father did. You provided. You kept the lights on and the fridge full, and you came home as often as you could. I should have asked more questions. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked fine. Gwen's car was gone, which wasn't unusual for a Thursday afternoon. I let myself in with my key, dropped my bag in the entryway, and called out Marcus's name. Nothing. I checked his room. His bed was made. 2 made, corners tucked in tight. The kind of neat that didn't look like an 8-year-old's doing. His bookshelf was organized. His Lego sets, which were usually spread across the floor in some half-finished construction project, were boxed and stacked in the closet. His drawings were gone. Marcus drew constantly, always had. Rockets and underwater cities and maps of places he invented. He kept them in a folder under his bed. I looked. The folder wasn't there. I called Gwen. She picked up on the second ring. "You're home early," she said. Not surprised. Not warm. Just a statement. "Where's Marcus?" A pause. "He's at the Horizon Academy program. I told you about it." I didn't remember her telling me about anything called Horizon Academy. 4 months of satellite calls that dropped mid-sentence, of trying to stay present from 200 miles offshore, things blurred. But something about the name sat wrong with me. What kind of program? It's a leadership development academy. For boys. Dr. Harlan runs it. They build discipline, focus, teamwork. Marcus was having trouble in school, acting out a little. It's been really good for him. "Where is it?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Out past Silsbee. It's a residential program, so the boys stay on site during the session." Residential. He's been living there? It's structured. The whole point is immersion. You can't just pull kids in and out. It disrupts the program. How long has he been there? 3 weeks. I was already looking for my truck keys. "I want the address." "Don't do this. You'll embarrass him in front of the other boys." Dr. Harlan says parental interruptions set the kids back significantly. Marcus is finally showing real progress. "Address, now." She gave it to me. Her voice had gone flat and careful, and I noticed that she didn't say anything else. Didn't try harder to stop me. I thought about that later. I think she knew, on some level, that something had gone wrong. I think she'd been not thinking about it for 3 weeks. The drive to Silsbee took 50 minutes. I pushed through farmland, then through pine forest, then onto a county road with no center line that wound back into property I couldn't see from the main road. The GPS address put me at a metal gate with a sign that said Horizon Leadership Academy, Building Tomorrow's Men. There was a keypad. I pressed the call button. No one answered. I pressed it again. Still nothing. I drove around the fence line until I found a section where a tree had come down on the wire and bent it low. I stepped over it. The main building was a converted barn, big, painted white, newer addition bolted onto the back. Behind it there was a cleared field, maybe 2 acres, and in that field there were boys. They were in rows, maybe 15 of them, spread out in the afternoon heat. They were pulling something, weeds I thought at first, or maybe crops of some kind. The field had rows of low plants I didn't recognize. Some kind of root vegetable, maybe. The boys wore long pants and work gloves and wide hats, and they moved slowly, bent at the waist, filling buckets. It was 91 degrees. I checked my phone on the drive. I found Marcus in the second row from the left. I knew him the way you know your own child, the specific shape of his shoulders, the way he favored his left hand, the particular way he tilted his head down when he was tired. He was moving slowly. Too slowly. Even from 30 yards away I could see that. I walked into the field. A man near the tree line saw me and started walking fast in my direction. He was broad-shouldered, wearing khakis and a polo shirt, walkie-talkie clipped to his belt. "Sir, this is private property. You need to. That's my son." Marcus heard my voice. He turned around. I don't have words for what his face looked like in that first second. Something broke open in it. Then he was running, stumbling on the uneven ground, and I met him halfway. He hit me hard enough that I had to step back to keep my balance. His arms went around my neck, and he was shaking before he even started crying. "Dad." That was all he said for a minute. Just that. "Dad." I held him up off the ground. He weighed less than he should have. I could feel his ribs. "I've got you. I've got you, buddy. They said you weren't coming back." His voice was muffled against my shoulder. "They said you decided it was easier without me. That you paid for the whole summer so you didn't have to think about me." I couldn't speak for a moment. "That's not true. None of that is true. Dr. Harlan said some parents put kids in the program because they want the break. He said it every time someone cried about their parents. He said we had to earn our way back to being worth picking up." The man with the walkie-talkie had stopped about 10 feet away. The other boys in the field had stopped working. They were watching. Some of them looked like they'd stopped believing in the thing they were watching. Some of them looked like they were afraid to. A boy near the end of the row, small, couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, probably the youngest kid out there, said quietly, not even to me, just to no one, "Does that mean someone might come for us too?" I looked at the man with the walkie-talkie. "How old is he?" I asked, meaning the small one. "The boys range in age. The program accommodates. How old?" He didn't answer. I picked Marcus up and started walking back toward the main building. The man got on his radio. Said there was a situation and he needed Dr. Harlan at the main entrance. Said it calm, like this was a protocol. Like this happened enough to have a protocol. By the time I got to the parking area, there were 3 men coming from the far side of the building. The one in the center was in his early 60s, silver-haired, the kind of tall that comes with a certain expectation of being listened to. He wore a pressed button-down and carried himself like someone who had never once been wrong about anything. "Mr. Tolf." "Calloway," he said, though I hadn't told anyone my name. He'd looked me up. He knew I was coming. "I understand you're concerned. That's natural. Parents often feel disoriented when they first engage with our model. My son just told me you told him I didn't want him." Dr. Twain, Harlan's expression didn't change. "We use specific language frameworks to help boys detach from external validation and develop internal motivation. It's clinically supported methodology. I'd be happy to send you the research. I'm taking him. I'm afraid that's not how the program works. Your wife enrolled Marcus through a 30-day residential agreement. You have 2 weeks remaining in the session, and removal prior to completion has significant developmental consequences. I have documentation of the agreement, and I'd ask you to review it before. Let me see it. The documentation is in my office, which I can make available to you tomorrow during our standard intake review hours." Marcus's grip on my shirt tightened. "Dad, please don't let them keep me here. I'll be good. Whatever I did wrong, I'll fix it. I'll fix it, I swear. You didn't do anything wrong." "That's not the language we use with the boys," Dr. Harlan said. "Accountability is." "Stop talking to me about language." I looked at the 3 men. I looked at the 3 men. I looked at the building behind them. I thought about what an 8-year-old boy meant when he said he'd fix it, when he looked at his father like that, when he'd clearly been told for 3 weeks that he was the reason he was there. "I'm leaving with my son. If you try to stop me, I will make sure every person within 50 miles knows exactly what's happening on this property." Dr. Harlan's calm didn't break, not fully, but something shifted behind his eyes. He nodded almost imperceptibly at the 2 men with him. One of them stepped into my path. I'd spent 4.5 months on an offshore platform. I worked with my hands every day. The man stepped back faster than he'd stepped forward. The second one didn't come at me. He went for Marcus instead, reached for his arm, and that was when Marcus screamed. A real scream. The kind that comes from somewhere deeper than surprise. I heard a vehicle, tires on gravel. A Harding County Sheriff's Department cruiser was pulling through the open gate. One of the staff must have called while we were talking, expecting the law to sort things in their favor. The deputy who got out was maybe 30. She took in the scene in pieces. Me, holding my son, 2 men on either side of me. Doctor now, Harlan standing back with his hands clasped in front of him like he was at a board meeting. What's the situation here? Dr. Harlan moved first. Deputy, thank you for coming. This man entered the property without authorization and is attempting to remove a minor who is enrolled in our program under a signed residential agreement. We have documentation. He's my son. I turned so the deputy could see Marcus. His face was sunburned. There was a raw, rubbed-looking patch on the inside of his wrist where the glove had been. His lips were dry. Look at him. He's been working in that field since I got here. Look at all those kids. The deputy looked toward the field. The boys had mostly stayed where they were, 15 kids in the afternoon heat, buckets in hand, watching. Something changed in her face. Sir, she said to Dr. Harlan, I'd like to see the facilities. You'll need a warrant for. I've got probable cause standing right there in that field. She was already reaching for her radio. I'm going to need you to stay put. What followed took the rest of the afternoon and into the evening. 2 more deputies arrived. Then a state trooper. Then someone from CPS who drove 40 minutes from Baymont and got there at dusk. Dr. Harlan tried to stay cooperative. He used the word program so many times it stopped sounding like a word. His staff kept redirecting people, standing in doorways, saying the documentation was somewhere else. It was in the system. They'd need to contact the main office. One of the staff tried to leave through a side exit with a box of files. That didn't work out for him. What they found inside was worse than the field. The residential quarters were in the converted barn. 23 boys, bunk beds bolted to the walls, narrow, no privacy, a single bathroom shared among all of them. A posted schedule on the wall, wake up at 5, breakfast at 5:30, morning session, which meant the field until noon, lunch, afternoon session until 5, dinner, evening session, which was Dr. Harlan lecturing them in a large room he called the forum, lights out at 9, no phone calls, no letters out. 1 visit per session from parents, scheduled and supervised. The discipline room was a converted storage closet, maybe 6 feet by 8, no windows. A single overhead bulb on a timer. The staff called it the reflection space. Marcus had been in it once, for asking a counselor when his dad was coming. I sat in my truck with my son while the deputies worked through the building. Marcus wouldn't let go of my hand. His grip was fierce, and he didn't say much. A paramedic who arrived with the 2nd unit checked him over. Mild dehydration. Sun exposure. Contusions on his palms and forearms from the work. Borderline underweight for his age. We should get him to urgent care, the paramedic said. I'm not leaving my dad. Marcus said it before I could. I'll follow right behind the ambulance, I told him. Promise, I promise. Say it again. I promise, buddy. I'm not going anywhere. He nodded. Let them check his vitals again. Kept holding my hand. Gwen arrived around 7:30. She'd driven out when I stopped returning her calls. She stood in the parking area looking at the cruisers and the CPS van and the light still going in the windows of the converted barn, and her face went through several things in quick succession. She tried to talk to Marcus. He turned his face away. I didn't know, she said to me. She said it the way people say things they're not sure are true anymore. The website looked legitimate. Dr. Harlan had testimonials, a whole professional profile. He had a PhD from somewhere. I just wanted Marcus to have structure while you were gone. He was acting out, and I didn't know how to handle it. And I thought, you didn't ask where he'd sleep. You didn't visit. She didn't have an answer for that. It came out in the investigation that Dr. Harlan had a degree, a real one, in organizational psychology, from a legitimate university. He'd run 2 other programs before this one, in different states, neither of which had resulted in criminal charges, both of which had closed under pressure after parent complaints. He'd gotten good at moving. He'd gotten good at paperwork that looked legal until a lawyer examined it closely. The residential agreement Gwen had signed had a clause in the fine print that suspended standard parental contact during the immersion period for therapeutic efficacy. She'd signed it without reading that far. The 23 boys came from 15 different families. Most of their parents had no idea what the daily reality looked like. A few had tried to call the facility and been told their child was in session and would return the call during the scheduled communication window, which never seemed to arrive. The produce from the field, sweet potatoes, and something else I never learned the name of, had been sold to a regional supplier. The boys hadn't been paid. Dr. Harlan had been pocketing the revenue as a program operating fee. They arrested him at 9:15 that night. He maintained his composure until the deputy read the charges. Then he started talking about his therapeutic model, about how the system didn't understand developmental intervention, about how these boys would have grown up into nothing without him. Nobody in that parking lot was listening. Gwen was arrested too. Not for the same charges. She hadn't known the extent of it, but she'd been the one who'd recruited 3 other mothers from Marcus's school to send their sons to the program. She'd been enthusiastic. She'd sent them the brochure. I didn't feel much about that, one way or another. I was sitting in the passenger seat of a stranger's car, because the paramedic had let us wait there while Marcus's IV ran, and my son had finally fallen asleep against my arm. The trial took 8 months. By then, I'd left the offshore rotation permanently, taken a job with an engineering firm in Beaumont that kept me home. Marcus and I moved to a smaller house, just the 2 of us and Pepper, the dog, who'd been staying with my sister during all of it and lost some weight of his own. Marcus started therapy twice a week with a woman named Dr. Finch, who had a waiting room with good magazines and a small fish tank, and who never once made Marcus feel like a problem to be solved. He liked her. He'd come out of session sometimes and say, "She actually listens," in the tone of mild surprise that children use when they're not used to it. Dr. Harlan was convicted of labor exploitation of minors, child endangerment, fraudulent contract practices, and several related charges. He received 32 years. His senior staff received sentences between 8 and 18 years. His defense tried to argue therapeutic privilege, that the program's methods were standard in the residential behavioral health field, and that the financial component was offset by the developmental value provided. The judge was not interested in that argument. Gwen received 4 years and probation. During the sentencing hearing, her attorney presented records showing she'd had a difficult childhood of her own. A mother who'd sent her to a similar kind of character-building program at age 10 that she'd never fully talked about. She'd genuinely believed that structured, immersive discipline was the thing that had straightened her out. She'd wanted that for Marcus because she thought it was the best thing she had to offer. That didn't make what she'd done right, but sitting in that courtroom, I understood it in a way that surprised me. And I thought about the fact that I had married her, had trusted her with my son, and had spent 4 months at a time offshore without asking enough questions about what daily life looked like in my own house. You don't get to outsource parenting and be surprised when someone else's values fill the space. Marcus didn't draw for the first 6 weeks after we came home. He watched a lot of television and slept irregular hours and flinched sometimes at sounds that were too loud. I didn't push him. Dr. 20. Finch had said to follow his lead. One morning, a Saturday raining, both of us home with no particular plans, I came into the kitchen and he was at the table with a pad of paper and a set of colored pencils, drawing something. I pretended not to notice. I made coffee and sat down across from him and read the newspaper. After a while, he slid the paper toward me. It was our house. The small one, the new one, with Pepper on the porch and the big oak tree in the front yard that dropped acorns every fall. He'd drawn himself in the upstairs window. He'd drawn me in the doorway. "Do you like it?" he asked. "It's the best drawing I've ever seen." "You say that about all my drawings." "I mean it about all your drawings." He went back to drawing. I went back to the newspaper. That was a good morning. 2 years out from the trial, a non-profit organization that worked on family safety and trafficking awareness reached out. They were putting together an educational series about residential program fraud, how families got targeted, what the warning signs were, how to vet a program before enrolling your child. They wanted to include our story, with our permission. Marcus was 10 by then. I asked him what he thought. "If it stops this from happening to other kids," he said, "then yeah." We started giving talks. Community centers, school boards, parent groups. The things we told them were simple, but not obvious. We told them to visit any residential program before enrolling. We told them to ask specifically where the children slept, what the daily schedule looked like, what the contact policy was. We told them that any program that discouraged parental visits during the enrollment period was a red flag regardless of what therapeutic rationale they offered. We told them to search the director's name in multiple states. We told them that professional-looking websites and impressive credential lists were not the same as accountability. We told them about the small boy at the end of the row who'd said, "Does that mean someone might come for us too?" Not everyone got out as well as Marcus. One of the boys, a 9-year-old named Henry who'd been there the full session, had an infection in his hands from untreated cuts that had to be treated with IV antibiotics for 2 weeks. A 13-year-old named Sam didn't speak to his parents for 4 months after coming home. The youngest boy, the one at the end of the row, was 6. His name was Wyatt. He'd been there for a month. 3 years later, Marcus was 11 and had won a regional award at a state science fair for a project about sustainable agriculture. Something he'd chosen specifically, he told me, because he wanted to understand what those plants were and why anyone would make kids grow them. His therapist said that was a form of integration, taking something that had happened to him and making it into knowledge he owned. He still drew. His room was covered in it again. Rockets and underwater cities and maps of places he invented. His folder under the bed was thick. On the 3rd anniversary of the day I'd stepped over that bent fence wire, we drove out past Silsbee. The property had been sold in the asset liquidation following the conviction. The barn had been demolished. Someone had turned the land into a plant nursery, flats of seedlings in low greenhouses, a small retail stand near the gate, a hand-painted sign. Marcus stood at the fence for a while. "Is it weird that it doesn't look like anything?" he asked. "No, that's probably good. I thought I'd feel something bigger. Do you feel anything?" He considered it. "I feel like it's just a plant place now." "Which is better." We stood there a few more minutes. The seedlings were small and green and crowded together in their trays, none of them any particular thing yet. On the drive home, Marcus put his feet up on the dashboard, which I'd told him 100 times not to do, and opened his sketchbook and started drawing. I let the feet on dashboard thing go. "Dad, yeah, do you think I'll stop having the dreams?" Dr. Finch had told me he might ask something like this eventually, and she'd told me what to say. But in the moment, I didn't say what she'd scripted. I just said what was true. "I don't know. I think they'll get smaller. I think there's more time between them already." "That's true," he said. "What were you drawing?" He held up the sketchbook. It was the nursery. Rows of seedlings, small and green, reaching toward something. "I'm going to put some kids in here," he said. "Playing. Not working. That's a good idea." He went back to drawing. I watched the road. I think about the version of things where the audit doesn't get pushed back. Where I stay on that platform another 6 weeks. Where I call on a satellite phone that cuts out before I can ask the right questions. And Marcus finishes the full program and comes home quieter, harder. Something subtracted from him that I don't have a name for because I wasn't there to see what got taken. I got lucky. I know I got lucky. But luck only gets you so far. The deputy got lucky too, showing up just as things broke open. The CPS worker got lucky, getting there in time to document what she documented before anything could be cleaned up. 23 families got some version of lucky, because one schedule change sent one person home 11 days early. That's not a system. That's not protection. The organizations we work with now are trying to build something more reliable than luck. Lists of questions parents can ask, databases of programs with documented complaints, legislation in 3 states that would require residential youth programs to register with the same oversight bodies that govern foster care. It's slow. It's not enough yet, but Marcus is 12 now, and last week he came home from school and dropped his backpack on the kitchen floor, which I've also told him 100 times not to do, and said, "Dad, guess what? I got into the art intensive." And his face was the face of a kid who believes good things are allowed to happen to him. That took a long time to come back. I don't take it for granted for a single day. I've thought a lot about the chain of choices that put Marcus in that field. Not just Dr. Harlan's choices or Gwen's, but mine. Every decision has a weight, and that weight doesn't disappear just because you're not watching it accumulate. I chose the offshore rotation. I chose to believe that financial stability was the same as presence. I chose, somewhere in the back of my mind, to not ask too many questions about what daily life looked like when I was gone, because asking meant confronting the answer, and I wasn't ready to do that. That's not guilt talking. Guilt is useless after the fact. What I'm describing is something more practical. The understanding that abdication has consequences, and the consequences don't wait for you to be ready. Marcus asked me once, during one of the harder months, whether I thought it was his fault for not telling me something was wrong. He'd had the phone. He could have called during the one scheduled contact window Dr. Harlan allowed. He hadn't, because Dr. Harlan allowed. Harlan had spent 3 weeks telling him that calling home to complain was evidence of the weakness that had gotten him sent there in the first place. That's how these things work. They don't operate on force alone. They operate on the rewriting of a child's interior logic until the child becomes their own jailer. An 8-year-old boy convinced that reaching for his father is a character flaw is not a boy who makes a phone call. I told Marcus the truth. It was never his fault, not for 1 second. But the harder truth I had to sit with myself was that children who feel genuinely secure, consistently, not just in theory, don't reach that level of isolation without pushing back harder. Marcus had already been quieter than he should have been. I'd noticed and told myself it was grief. It was, partly. But it was also a boy adjusting to a household where he didn't feel fully certain of his ground. I contributed to that uncertainty by being gone so much. Dr. Harlan's people had simply weaponized it. The strength it takes to survive something like that and come back, to pick up colored pencils again, to draw your house with your dad in the doorway, to stand at a county fence line and say it's just a plant place now, which is better. That's not something you're born with, and not something anyone gives you. It builds from the moments when someone shows up and doesn't let go. Every time I followed the ambulance. Every Saturday morning making coffee while Marcus drew at the kitchen table. Every drive home from Dr. Tim Finch's office. Each one of those moments laid a plank across a gap that could have stayed open for years. Intelligence alone won't save a child who doesn't believe they're worth saving. Resilience alone won't either. What Marcus rebuilt was something harder to name. A basic trust in the reliability of the people who said they loved him. That trust had to be earned back one ordinary Tuesday at a time. I'm not a perfect father. I was absent too long, asked too few questions. Let convenience substitute for scrutiny in ways that cost my son something real. What I know now that I didn't know then is that parenting is not a thing you provide from a distance and collect the results of when you return. It's a daily presence, or it's a daily absence, and both of those things shape a child whether you intend them to or not. Marcus drew a nursery full of children playing in it, not working. Playing. That picture is on our refrigerator. I see it every morning. It reminds me of what we almost lost and what we still have, and that the difference between those two things was 11 days and one canceled audit, and a decision to drive instead of call. I don't take a single ordinary morning for granted. Not one.